the best is the enemy of good. And that absolutely does not mean don't strive to be the best. It just means don't expect to be the best from the get-go. I was brought up to see perfectionism as a good thing. Perfectionism means wanting everything that we do to be, well, perfect. What could possibly be bad about that? Well, perhaps perfectionism sometimes subconsciously holds me back, preventing me trying new things or leading me to give up when I've only just started. This is the story of my battle with perfectionism, and the lesson I think we all need to learn from hugely successful people. The other day, while listening to an interview with Elon Musk, the guy who founded Tesla, I couldn't help but ask myself, how is it that Elon Musk, who seems to be honest like perfectionism's poster boy, can set himself the most ridiculous goals like sending a rocket to space and achieve it? Yet you or I can strive to do something as simple as writing an essay or making a video and feel cripplingly inadequate, underqualified, so far from perfect that we procrastinate, or worse, stop trying altogether. What differentiates these seeming perfectionists who manage to do everything perfectly from me? Here's the thing though, when you dig a little, maybe they aren't really the perfectionists they at first appear, unable to settle for anything less than, well, perfection. Maybe the reality is that our impatient brains, with the help of Hollywood, are blind to their painful iterations, failings, rejections. Their hardships and imperfections have been deleted and turned into a much simpler and easier story of overnight success. Well, I want to quickly tell you a story about my own kind of lack of success. When I was 10 years old, I tried to learn to play the trumpet. And in my 10-year-old head, the trumpet only had 3 buttons versus 88 on the piano. So like it should only have been 3 88s as hard as piano. And I'd heard other people playing it and it sounded pretty good. Like I could probably just bang out a bit of jazz or whatever and it'd be amazing. And I very, very quickly realized that my hopes of playing anything that sounded even close to a song, never mind jazz, were kind of completely wildly inflated and misplaced. And certainly I, and indeed my poor mum, were wildly disappointed by the results of my playing the trumpet. And pretty much on the spot, within a couple of days, I gave up. And I decided I am not good at the trumpet. And I also decided I'm not good at music generally, like music just not my thing. And that was it. I haven't been near a trumpet since. And that's the case for so many of us. We do something for a really short period. Like maybe you've tried to learn to code and you've spent a couple of hours watching YouTube videos and you're just like, ah! Or you've tried to learn a language, or you've tried to learn to play an instrument. And we put loads of pressure on ourselves, expecting ourselves to get better than is humanly possible really, really quickly, often in comparison to others. And then we get overwhelmed by everything there is to do, everything there is to learn, so overwhelmed that we just give up. Now, not all of us have the goal, at least not right now, of creating a space exploration company to rival NASA. And for me personally, at least, I actually don't want to emulate Musk's insane work ethic and his compulsive attention to detail.
I don't think you'd necessarily want to be me.
Well, what's the worst part about you?
I don't think people would like it that much.
Well, most people wouldn't, but they can't be you.
But we can learn from these giants, from Bezos to Musk, to Zuckerberg to Winfrey. And most of all, I believe that we can learn from their tireless pushing, not for perfection, but to get better, to get closer. When you boil it down at its core, the difference between these stellar performers and the rest of us is their ability simply to set goals they care about, to break those goals down into actionable steps that they can actually take, and then to build a really strong habit of taking those steps towards their goals as efficiently and as quickly as possible. And they work tirelessly and persistently, in contrast to movies that show their seemingly overnight success.
This time, you're gonna hand them a business card that says, I'm CEO.
To work towards those goals iteratively. It's not a straight line, it has ups and downs, but they persistently work through those different steps that they need to take, and they move in the direction of their ultimate goals. To bring it back to Musk, he's often cited as a perfectionist, but I simply do not agree with this assertion. He, yes, strives to be the best, and yes, he sets an insanely high bar for himself and his employees, But that doesn't exactly make him a perfectionist. Indeed, Musk's Teslas continue to suffer from the most fundamental competitive disadvantage, and that is the inability to get in a product designed to get you from A to B to point B if it is further than 500 miles from point A, due to the car's limited battery life and the fact that you have to spend over a day charging your Tesla if you don't have a supercharger on hand. But it is precisely this willingness to chase a goal, to revolutionize the automotive industry and make electric cars commonplace in the face of undeniable imperfections, that to me differentiates Musk from me and other people that I know.
I think it's possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary.
So for me, the biggest lesson to take away from Musk is completely antithetical to everything that the media tell you about Musk and his perfectionism. It's the fact that when we start to make progress, right at the start of our journey towards a goal, often the progress that we make will feel small and imperfect. Just like when you look at the first Teslas that were created, or you look at the rockets that SpaceX were first working on, they were not a patch on what they've now managed to achieve, and they're still moving towards their ultimate goal of revolutionizing the automotive industry and making electric cars truly mainstream. We need to stop overwhelming ourselves with how far we still have to go, and to remember, as Voltaire said, that the best is the enemy of good. And that absolutely does not mean don't strive to be the best. It just means don't expect to be the best from the get-go. Cal Newport, in his book Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, argues that people tend to jump from activity to activity, from subject to subject, or from job to job, looking for their passion. He suggests that this is completely misguided, because the reality is that no one is inherently passionate about anything. We all just need to pick something we care about, decide on something we want to get better at, and then commit to long-term progress towards that goal, rather than expecting to do it overnight, because it just doesn't happen that way for anyone. And that's the problem with true perfectionism. Not the perfectionism that people talk about in relation to Musk, but true perfectionism, where you expect the very first time that you do something to be perfect. And let me give you a really simple example of how I've applied this to my own life in a very problematic way. When I was doing job applications, I remember the first one that I did, I really wanted it to be as perfect as it could be. And I spent ages on this application, like way longer than I should have done. And I sent it off and I was rejected. And I remember thinking, like, how could I have been rejected with this application? Like, it was so amazing. And then I did another one. I did this one a bit quicker because I was like, well, trying to make it perfect didn't work, so I'm just going to make it better. And then I did another one. And I'd probably done 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I looked back when I was doing the 8th one, which I hadn't tried to make perfect. And I compared it to the first one that I'd done. And it was so much better than this first application that when I looked back at the first application, I was like, of course you didn't get the job with this. Like, I wouldn't have hired you on the basis of this application. The reality is that it's way more powerful to repeatedly do something to a very good standard and to try to make it, yes, very good, but to accept that it's not necessarily going to be perfect and to learn from that experience than it is to waste loads of time trying to make the very first time you do something perfect. So I think for me, I try to remember at all times the law of diminishing returns and to stop myself when I feel like something's good, really good, but not quite perfect. And this is something Jeff Bezos has talked about in interviews, even now that he is the richest man on planet Earth.
We know from our past experiences that big things start small. The biggest oak starts from an acorn, and you've got to recognize, if you want to do anything new, you've got to be willing to let that acorn grow into a little sapling and then finally into a small tree, and maybe one day it'll be a big business on its own. You can't skip steps. You have to put one foot in front of the other. Things take time. There are no shortcuts, but you want to do those steps with, passion and ferocity.
And one final point that's really helped me to overcome my own perfectionism. When I feel myself wanting to give up because I feel like all the work I'm putting in just isn't paying off and I'm not getting the results I'm after, I think of what Tim Collins refers to as the flywheel. And it's this idea that when you first take the crank of the flywheel, it's really tough. Like, it takes so much energy and so much work to get any momentum going. But once you've got round that first crank, it gets faster and faster and faster, and you gather this momentum in a way that leads you to feel much more optimistic and much more positive and like you're moving towards where you want to be. Don't give up on that first crank of the flywheel. Let yourself crank that first time and hopefully then momentum will come. And I really quickly want to tell one final story because I think this story is so powerful in illustrating to anyone who's ever not achieved a goal, and that applies to pretty much all of us, that it is possible to achieve anything you set your mind to. And it's the story of Matthew Syed, and he's the author of one of my favourite books ever called Bounce. And basically his story goes something like this. He was a young guy who was fairly uncoordinated at school, not that good at sport, and he basically decided, age kind of 11, I think, something like that, to become a table tennis player. And this guy who, self-confessed was not that coordinated and not that talented in a traditional sense. He became an Olympian. He won the Commonwealth Games for table tennis 3 times, and he is a massive advocate of the myth of talent. I'm going to do a future video on this because it's really fundamental to my beliefs. But I think it's hugely powerful to know that someone who had kind of nothing innately seemingly going for them in the pursuit of a goal still managed to achieve that goal and become hugely successful because they put in tons of meaningful and good quality practice over the course of many years.
You arrive at the conclusion that champions are not born, they're made.
And I think we live in an age where everything seems so instant, and Instagram, we see people who are better than us, cleverer than us, more attractive than us or whatever. And it seems as though everything comes so easily to others and it doesn't to us. And I really just want to cut through that, and I hope that this video has to a degree shown that even as far as Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or Oprah Winfrey is concerned, actually beneath the surface of their success are many hours of hard work and a willingness to persist through imperfection, the opposite of perfectionism. And given that our so-called intelligence is similarly linked to the quality of the time we spend studying rather than any innate cleverness, my ebook The Rules of Revision by 10 Oxford and Cambridge students will help you strive towards performing better in your exams, driving forward in spite of your imperfections. The ebook is available now with 40% off using the discount code on screen, and you can also get a hard copy of the book from Amazon. And once you've checked that out, go watch my 5 a.m. wake up experiment, where I see what all the hype around 5 a.m. get-ups is about.